Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much.
Helen Keller penned that. The American author, the disability rights advocate, the political activist, lecturer. I was reading, I was going to say a little more about her, but actually it turned out to be a lot more about her. She was this, an incredible woman. I'll leave a film on the show page today about her life, and if, like me, you might find yourself wandering down the rabbit hole of interconnected films on YouTube as I did, learning about her. In short, though, she lost her sight and her hearing when she was but 19 months old. But it didn't stop her becoming this amazing force of inspiration for her long life, learning to communicate as well as any other against the odds in some respects for a generation still learning how to work and come to terms with how to work with disability. But she became the first deaf-blind person in the United States to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. She lobbied, she worked her life to promote inclusion and the potency of togetherness. And I've chosen those words at the head of today's photo walk as we walk together here because they connect with this idea of being part of something, being part of, well, in terms of today's conversation, a modern tribe, which in David Gilbert Wright's world as a documentary photographer is important because he's been making stories about the modern tribes of England, such as climate change activists. And he's learned through research that being part of something more, belonging to a community or a group, or in this case a modern tribe, brings about social change already. Barney Sabarkalot's in the water already. So soon, Barnes. It's a chilly day with a blue sky. It can't be very pleasant in there. But yes, David's learned about this idea of being part of something, that it's good it's good for social change, but it's good for mental change for you personally, or actually physical change as well, just being part of a club or a group. And that's partly what I'll be talking with David later on about. He's one of Britain's quietly admired names in documentary circles by his peers and by many recognised photographers in the field of journalism and photojournalism. 402 episodes in today. Welcome to the Photo Walk, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you've sent in, and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world, explorers, motivators, and today a very English documentary photographer.
Today on the Photo Walk.
Being in a dark room, translating what Ansel Adams has said, the negative, which is like the score, into the print, which is like the performance. There's something in that. I'd read a number of books about groups and how important it was to be a member of a group and how interconnectedness can really benefit you as a person. Photographs for me, a camera helps me come to terms with reality, because if I photograph it, I know that there it is and it's happened.
David Gilbert Wright, and you'll meet him in a while. And before I give you a flavour of what's also in today's mailbag that's travelling with us, thank you to our extra milers and mpb.com who sponsor this show and keep it here week on week. mpb.com, well, they're a website where you can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online and be part of the circular economy. If you're buying, you get peace of mind because there's a 6-month guarantee. If you are trading or selling, MPB will send a courier to pick up your kit on a day you specify, and once it's arrived back at their warehouse and gone through all the checks to make sure it's been graded properly, you get paid directly into your account quickly. mpb.com is a very easy to use website, and it's helping photographers to buy quality used kit or sell gear that we no longer need to free up some cash and give others a chance to make their stories. Go to mpb.com. I will have a link on today's show page as well. On the show then, a whirlwind pictorial trip to Alaska, postcards that don't have to boast vista-like views, places that are on your photographic bucket list. That could start a long feature. What's Mickey Mouse about weddings, he asks, with a big question mark. The beauty of the lakes. Why printing your pictures is better than hoping Insta will reward you with likes. Plus, our friend, artist and podcaster Jeffery Saddoris is here as we think and muse about our best work. And though this isn't everybody, you will find a great amount of creatives who think their best work might have been right at the start of this journey. Right, shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee, check. And Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. And rain jacket. Winter is nigh, check. Let's walk.
Barney's just seen his first ever otter. I was too slow to get a picture, obviously. Not the right lens anyway. To be fair, as my 15-year-old would say when we're talking about his homework, to be fair, I did some last week. What? There's always a part of me with a great beaming broad smile whenever I get pictures into the show via stories at photowalk.show from around this incredible planet of ours. And in the spirit of sharing, these will be on the show page today for episode 402, as will all the pictures and some of the films and stories that we talk about. So let me just start with a pointer toward the show page today. Some images from around the world, including a wish you were here. And I suppose this first one could be a wish you were here, though it's devoid of any words for it to be a true postcard. But Miles Barfield, thank you for your wonderful Alaskan trip pictures. It is one of those places on my list of must photograph there. It is a growing list. I love in particular it's a shelf, isn't it? An ice shelf. There's a very abstract nature with a small and capital N, and I'll put them on the show page today. I've got a number of must photograph there places, including some must photograph there again places. The pyramids being certainly in the top 5 of that list. I remember going there making, I used slide film actually, that particular journey. Found them only a few years ago. It was my youngest son that found them. Said, what are these? They're slides. They're what? Slides. That's magic. As he looked through a small viewer at the pictures against a window that came to life in a way that only slide film can when you pop it in a viewer and stand next to a window. But it was an incredible experience. For a while you couldn't go in the pyramids, but now you can. You can go in them again, and that's something I'd very much like to do. I wonder, I didn't feel in the least nervous. I don't get anxious about stuff like that, but it does cross my mind. You feel incredibly small in that place. You feel very small, surrounded by 5.7 million tons of stone. I looked this up, obviously. I don't know this as a pub quiz answer off the top of my head, but 2.3 million blocks of stone, some as many as 3 tons apiece. I mean, what a feat of engineering. 20 years-ish it took to build, 100,000 workers, not necessarily working within health and safety rules, I know, but can you imagine being the person who was blessed, or maybe cursed, with the task of putting the last stone, the capstone as they call it, on the very top of the pyramid? I mean, how they managed to get it to the top, I don't know. But that surely is, I mean, this wish list of mine, that's surely a Photowalk special to Egypt, isn't it? Which will have to firmly go into another folder called Dreams. I know it's not the same thing, by the way, but our Jack, our eldest, playing Minecraft, when he was younger, we built a huge pyramid. Took us ages. And I remember he put the top stone on the top, when I'd gone to the loo. I mean, it was It was supposed to be a shared son and dad moment. And part of me wonders if the Great Pyramid has a similar story. You know, everybody's readying themselves for the big final stone placing, which is probably at dawn or something like that, when somebody points out, "Oh, you're too late. Stubby did it last night at knocking off time so he could spend the day in the pub." Anyway, and then another one from Tim Binder. This is a Wish You Were Here postcard, and it too is on the show page today. Neil, last week my wife had a business meeting in Cleveland, or Cleveland Land, Ohio. I took some time off and drove up with her, and while I was there I met a friend, Gerald Mills, and we walked the street of Cleveland taking photographs. This particular shot, well, it's not that exciting, other than the man on the top of the building waving his hat at me. He had a huge grin on his face, though it's not easy to see the photograph itself. It's not. I pixel peeped, and I couldn't necessarily see him smiling, but I'll take your word for it. But your picture, I mean, when you say it's not all that, it is all that. It's exactly the kind of postcard I'm looking for. Postcards of life. When you visit places, they don't have to be these huge, big vistas. I mean, it's nice when they are. I mean, the Alaskan pictures, lovely. But they don't have to be that. They can be observations. I talked about this before, I know, but the postcards of my youth. I mean, I don't know who had the idea. It used to be in the local newsagent. There was a postcard stand, a local post. I don't know how many people bought postcards in Hartford. I mean, it wasn't a great hub of tourism, but it was a county town, but it wasn't a hub of tourism. But there was a postcard of the Waitrose development, and for those that live outside the UK, Waitrose was a supermarket. I mean, who thought, I know what we'll do? People will be chomping at the bit to get a postcard of Waitrose, so they will. But I love the treatment on your photograph, this dark, foreboding sky. I'm a huge fan of low key, as you well know, and the work that is well documented by Don McCullin. Well, I don't need to explain who he was, but for those that maybe my other listener who aren't quite aware of his heritage in photography as being the photographer's photographer, those who don't recall the picture, the 1,000-yard stare of the Marine. I mean, having said that, I mentioned it the other day in a Zoom call I was having with a group, and no, it wasn't universally known, but that particular picture and others, Don McCullin, from his time working in war zones, conflict zones, famine zones, his photography, even to this day, has a dark edge to it. If you look at the pictures of is it Somerset Flats, where he lives, always very dark skies. They draw that sky right in. There's a feeling of doom within the pictures. But I really like those photographs. So that dark, foreboding sky for me, Tim, did it for me. But do not look at this picture if you suffer from vertigo. That's all I will say. It's a classic look-up photo. Do you remember we used to do a feature in the middle of the show where we just stopped and took a picture straight ahead of whatever you could see at the time? I'd do a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, picture, and it had to be wherever you were. And if that was an office, hopefully not the bathroom, clearly, but if it was an office, fine. I wonder whether we should do a look up one, wherever you are, stop, look up, make a picture. It could be very interesting. I mean, it won't be just skies. It'll be buildings, the insides of buildings. I don't know. The sky, stand by, the sky is literally the limit. Ting! Anyway, thanks, Tim. Thank you, Miles, for the pictures. If you would like to send your Wish You Were Here's in, your postcards, and I'd be delighted to hear from you. 2,500 pixels wide, if you can manage to resize the pictures, please, for the show page. Otherwise, I'll do is it heavy lifting, Neil? Yes, I'll do the heavy lifting. Send them to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Barney, you've been great today. We had a bit of a set to at the start. Bit of a verbal set to, didn't we? Where you were barking at me. You were off your lead, you were barking at me, and you wouldn't come back. You got half a tennis ball. I didn't know what it was. Yeah, I'm right on cue. I'm talking to you. You have been good, though. So look, early ASMR here. Let's put the letters. Do not step on the letters, as you usually do. There we go. Nice. One more. One more for the road, sir. Don't mind if I do. Right. Does that buy me a bit of quiet for the next letter? I hope so. The arguments that I have with Barnes, they're actually quite comical. Just across the canal, there's a building we were walking past. Some of the people of this factory unit were out having a coffee, sitting there, and I was trying to catch Barney with his half tennis ball, not quite sure what he had in his mouth. There's me, this slightly overweight but working on it 56-year-old, and Barney, 2-year-old, cockapoo, running backwards and forward. He had at least 2 furlongs on me, probably more. Barnes, there's a swan up here. Oh no, a swan right in the middle of the path. Why do they do this? Look, you've got the whole canal. Here we go, as usual, thugs of the river. I've gone off swans, I tell you this each week, I know, but I really have. They're just, look, he's waiting for it. He's looking at me, he's looking at Barney thinking, I'll have you, I will. Oh, he's going into the river. Good. Good, Barnes. Right, where do we go next? I know it's been a busy whirlwind month in terms of the programme and the retreat edition, but I wonder if the challenge was a tad tough this month. I'm talking about the assignment. I'm still receiving some pictures for it, and I will be putting them on the show page. But in essence, the coveted new flask, will it be safe this month? I don't know. Lend me your ears, though. And we'll recap, shall we, the assignment from Phil Penman. Pick a subject. Examples include a person of interest, a local sports team, or perhaps a fishing village that you're visiting. That seemed a bit left field, but you might be, I don't know. And make pictures to tell the story of that person, that team, or that place. Can you hear the sirens in the background? They're on their way to arrest the thugs, the swans. Neil, you need to move on from this. The important thing, says Phil, is, he's not looking for a single picture. It could be as many as 15 separate images. It doesn't have to be 15. 15 is not necessarily a target. I've got a story myself, and it's certainly not 15. The idea is that when somebody sees your picture, says Phil, they can tell a story from them. I will link to the assignment on today's show page, but of course it's on the website anyway. If you go to the website, photowalk.show, the assignments tab is there under features, and you'll find the latest assignment, and hopefully by the time you see it, I may have uploaded some of the entries for it. Right, here is a letter from Germany land, from Mattis Vescher. Good morning, Neil. I'm wondering whether I'll manage to finish this letter. I'm wondering whether I got the pronunciation of your name right. I certainly hope I have. They end up books more than letters, says Matisse. I usually think about writing in while on my commute, my main time window of listening to the podcast. And since I'm not capable of doing 2 things at once, you join the club, I either miss half the programme or I get distracted during my writing, meaning all of my letters to you, they end up unfinished. But not this time. Cross his fingers, challenge on. Firstly, I'd like to share a quick thought about that photography referred to in one of your shows mockingly as Mickey Mouse. Yes, Matisse. Just say it, you mean wedding work, don't you? Yes, weddings. Oft looked down upon by photographers in other proper and very real genres. My words, not Matisse's now. Like celeb photographers and fashion photographers. I mean, they say, I couldn't imagine doing weddings. I have the deepest admiration for you, whilst behind your back, most of them are saying, weddings? Is that real photography? And I know that's a sweeping generalisation. But 20 years of doing this has taught me a thing or 3. I was even watching a TED talk by a photographer who we've had on this show a while back, actually, who's become, I would say, reasonably famous now for very good reason, which is probably why none of my letters are getting responded to now, he says, with a certain degree of middle-aged grub. And this TED speaker, TED talker, inadvertently, I'm not sure even if he knew he'd said it, maybe he didn't mean to say it this way, but I did wince when he suggested that he wanted to do something in photography that meant more than simple social photography. And here comes the word. He did use the word snaps, didn't he? Anyway, Matisse, I'm hijacking your letter. That's taken a year to write, so we should at least read it. I myself, Matisse said, back in the room, I myself dipped my toes into wedding photography recently when a couple I know through a mutual friend got married and asked me if I'd like to document their special day. They'd seen my other work and they loved the candids I took, so I thought, well, why not? In for a penny, as we might say in the UK. I was pretty confident at first, but I got nervous as the event came closer, and I wonder what I've been thinking, agreeing to this. Yeah, we all put our hands up in that respect, don't we? Those times when we say, did we agree to this? Who talked me into this? Go on, pups, in you go. He's found his favourite beach. Go on, in you go. Good boy, have a swim. Watching videos and reading blogs about the topic and looking at other people's work, talking to friends who do this occasionally, I try to prepare myself. Is that you, Matisse, on the train? Wave. There you are, Coach D. I tried to prepare myself best as I could by doing all that, anticipating whatever the universe could throw at me, even writing a checklist and buying new, fresh and fast, working SD cards. I took the couple out for a test shoot to see whether I could do this and also to see whether we'd get along, which is quite an important part of the process. Although I have to say, these days, and it's a result of COVID, I used to meet all the couples and people that I photographed, well, pretty much all before, not those that were abroad, clearly, but pretty much all before the date. And now Zoom has become this currency where we no longer do that kind of thing. You want to meet in person? Is that really necessary? Why don't we Zoom, Neil? Oh, all right then. Anyway, I met the couple, and it turned out I could do it, and we did like each other, and I did love it. Now, don't get me wrong, I still prefer landscapes, being out and about, experiencing the beauty Mother Nature holds for us to discover. That's where I find true inner peace, but capturing honest, emotional moments of people on a wonderful day like their wedding day, well, what's not to love? I very much enjoyed it. 2 of the images are here. I'll put them on the show page today, and they're my personal favourites from that day. If there's anything I learned from this, it's that it's always worth getting out of your comfort zone, and we're probably capable of far more than we think. Bravo, hear, hear. Since then, well, there's more, Matisse. Well, you've written a letter, you've finished a letter, might as well get all your thoughts out. Since then, we've undertaken a road trip to the UK. We actually came last summer, spending roughly 3 weeks in our small camper van, visiting a good portion of the Highlands and the Inner Hebrides. And boy, did we fall in love with the place, the land and the people. From skinny dipping in Loch Ness. And I know from having recorded a segment last week, Loch Ness is chilly, even in August going into September, to visiting the Old Man of Store on Skye, meeting wonderful people and spending a night in a pub. So incredible. I'd think it was a movie. Did they have a lock-in? That sounds like a lock-in to me. Anyway, we've just returned from a longer trip this time, adding in the Lake District. We hiked up, and I love the names in the Lake District. We hiked up Catbells, Maidenmore, and later on in the trip, Harrison Stickle and Pavey Ark. Aren't they wonderful? Who named them? Enjoying beautiful sights along the way. And again, we met incredibly nice, incredibly interesting people. We kind of came home to a few places we'd been the year before, found some new magnificent places, and I'd like to stress this, returned home with 2 side mirrors despite driving the many narrow roads in a left-hand drive car. Is it legal to have roads that narrow? Well, Kelly said very much the same to us when she was on our retreat. She came from Canada land into Scotland and looked at our roads with a degree of horror. Most of the time, there were 2 cars. In my car, she was in the passenger seat, commenting that I was driving far too close to the hedges. Maybe I was, I don't know. Or maybe if you're not used to our narrow roads in some of these mountains and valleys and hills and lochs and so on and so forth, then I can understand it. This for sure wasn't our last trip to neither the Highlands nor the Lake District. So the 3 shots attached could kind of count for the Wish You Were Here feature, I guess, though the length of the letter, I'm not sure that would fit on a postcard, even if writing in the size of text that would require a magnifying glass. But they kind of do count. Thank you for a continuously great podcast. It gives me lots of inspiration, motivation and entertainment. And, well, would you look at that? You've finished a letter. All the best from Hanover, Germany land. Just stunning work on the show page today, Matisse. And being one of those, what do we call them, Mickey Mousers myself, I totally appreciate the work you put into the wedding pictures. I really do. In particular, I love the photo behind the bride and groom, surveying all that is happening in their world that day as people eat a banquet in their honour. It's quite the moment for those that have been through it. And as for the landscape shots, well, I can see they are your bag for sure. I understand the pleasure you have in finding quiet within your world when you make those kind of photographs. So thank you for sending those in. If you'd like to send yours in, then stories@photowalk.show is the email address. Send your stories, send your pictures to that address. I say every week, and we do have a few to go through. You don't have to send pictures, because I know there are new photographers or those that don't necessarily think of themselves as photographers who enjoy the podcast, who take a walk. And I'm delighted to hear from you as well with what getting out into the countryside, the fresh air, and it has been a bit fresh of late, if you know what I mean, with the farmers' fields, then it's good to hear from you as well. Just before I introduce my guest on the show today, documentary photographer David Wright. Some dates for your diary. Though the webpage for Scotland 24, the next retreat, we have one booked in, is due to be finished. I think we have all the details in place, actually. It's a case of sitting down, finding some time and finishing the show page. I'm almost there. A few things to tie up this end, but I can give you the dates for the next Scottish retreat. I am doing this as a heads up. See what your diary says sort of thing, and then I'll formally release the full details in the next week or so with a form to join us. Next year's Scottish retreat, drum roll please. Arrivals on Sunday the 8th of Jan. Departures on the 14th, on the Saturday. So it runs Sunday to the Friday night. That's when we have our meal together, our sort of look back at the week meal, and then everybody starts to depart on the Saturday. I can tell you that we will be going back into the dark room and going on some lochside walks. Well, we are in Scotland, and dining on some fabulous evening conversation as well as the food. And some new picture feedback sessions that we're planning. Plus, I'm adding in 2 new events to the week, really. Half a day from an established writer on creative writing, which will probably stretch into the day as we go walking. And, so you can get confident with all forms of writing, really, from poetry to writing for Instagram, I suppose, for your socials, for your website, for your blog. And I don't know why it's taken so long, but we'll be running a day on the sound of your pictures. I've touched on it in the past, glanced, perhaps is a better expression, but actually spending time with you talking about including sound in your photo stories, how to marry your photographs to sound. We've not done that on any of the retreats so far, and I plan to add that, and you'll be coming away with some basic sound kit to continue that, stand by for the word, the J word that is, journey. So it's Sunday the 8th to Saturday the 14th. We have 6 places available, but that's it, 6 places, and those dates, well, check your diary, as they say. And if you don't mind, while we're about it, I'll mention that the sound experience is also going to be carried into our African retreat. We're off together to contemplate and photograph together this coming January in the Gambia, the smiling coast of Africa, spending time with the people of this wonderful, wonderful place, making river trips, visiting markets, photographing in villages, being at one with the wildlife at times as well, making documentary projects and experiencing the food of the region together. A 10-day guided photo trip. And if you'd like more info, well, we have a new forwarding, website address, a new forwarding website address, much easier than saying go to the website, go to the tab. The website address that forwards you to the page that tells you more about this trip is photowalkgambia.show. photowalkgambia.show. Right. My guest this week is a documentary photographer who I think, I said the photographer's photographer. I've used that expression already when talking about Don McCullin, but I would say for many photographers, this photographer is that. He's well known, he's regarded in the photographic community for his keen eye for a story. He's been making stories for decades now. He is, or at least his subjects are, in the main, Englishly English. Well, at times. Photographing Brick Lane in the 70s, that's on his website. Steam fairs, studying our folk traditions, London life. Though he's photographed stories that take an interest in British values too, and then further afield, such as his work in Nepal. I think you can really only scratch the surface when you talk to somebody with such a catalogue of observation, but I'll do my best in two short parts here. I want to talk about his modern tribes work. I want to talk to him about that thing we don't talk about in England. I can't even bring myself to say the word. I'm being that English. You'll have to listen to the interview. So, here's part one of my chat today with David Wright, David Gilbert Wright. Black and white, mainly documentarian with a camera.
David, the road to the darkroom started with a painting passion.
Yeah, I originally was very interested in painting. Whilst at school, I found I got a lot of success, and I thought to myself, what I'd really like to do is go to art college and do painting. And while I was there in foundation, you do a range of things. Photography was one of the options, and suddenly it lit my imagination, and I was away. I thought, this is much quicker, and I could get my ideas out faster than I could on using paint. It was about ideas. I was interested in what I could do with things. And so early photography was often about, how I could play around with light and shade, and then eventually with colour. And during the sort of punk period, whilst we were looking for ways to express ourselves differently, shall we say, in the same way as kind of early punk was, going to the garage and get some kit and just thrash away, and it didn't really matter what it was like or how it sounded. So too was the climate in the 76 period in college. We just wanted to be different, do our own thing, and so I explored the idea of what the camera can do if you use the other end of your focal position on a lens rather than sharp. It completely out of focus, and it was just a different way of looking.
Actually, that plays into this idea of, you've shot such a breadth of subject matter. I was going to ask, are you a documentarian? It's clear that you are. The stories cover a lot of, I wonder whether it comes from that punk period, actually, since you mentioned it, David. They do cover some social angst. It's something that you are genuinely intrigued by.
I see myself as a storyteller, in the same way as sort of many documentary photographers are. So it's not so much I'm looking for news sensationalism. If we're referring, say, to the climate change activists, I saw them as another one of those tribes that I was working on with my sort of Modern Tribes of England series. So when I went to photograph the climate change activists, I was not trying to just photograph them, for kind of news. I was interested in them as people, and what brought them together, and why they did what they did, and how they did what they did, which is why, my approach to them covers 4 sections. It covers people, and then forms of protest, and then non-violent passive resistance or disobedience, and finally arrest. And that series, if you view it, you'll see it as a story that splits up into those sections to enable me and the viewer to get an idea of what these people were like and why they were like that. People often misunderstand that series. I've been showing it recently, and I think they think I am one of them. But in that respect, I'm trying to adopt the approach of I'm on the outside looking in, but at the same time be very in the group, very immersive, so that what you really see is these people from within the limits of their own sort of group. And that's what I've always tried to do is become very immersive and get to know the people and get them to trust me, so they would just almost ignore me and let me carry on with the job.
There's an enveloping feel to your photography, and that's to do with your proximity. You push your way into the picture, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, push is maybe a word sometimes actively used, other times I'm accepted right in. I mean, recently I was photographing some travellers and they were buying and selling horses, and we were right in the middle of this group, and I was right there with my wide angle lens, and I've got the guy right up in my face, but he's talking to the bloke next to me, and they're talking about the value of this horse and whether it was as good as he was trying to say it was. And there's a number of onlookers, and also there's the horse peering in right in the picture. So we've got this group of 6 people plus horse, all talking about this horse and all bargaining backwards and forwards and saying you've got to be joking and all the rest of it. And I'm there with my camera. So in that respect, I'm actually in that group. Yeah. Other times, it is a case of sometimes you have to push. That you refer to the climate change one. There's a picture of a woman being arrested, and I am within about 2 or 3 foot, and the police didn't realise what I was doing, so I was able to take the picture, and then about another minute later they twigged and intervened and sort of got in the way of me and said, no, you can't do this, we need to put her in the van, she's got to go off. That was a case of push yourself in, but I always kind of go with the idea that what you need to do, you don't need a telephoto. Telephotos get that impression of peering in, be it spying on or whatever, whereas put a wide angle lens on and you've got to be actually nearer than you would imagine to get all of that. So you actually have to be accepted and trusted and part of that group, whatever it is, in order to get those pictures.
Do you think people, when you work in such close proximity then with a wide-angle lens, I wonder if there's, I've mused on this one before, whether there's a degree of more acceptance because you're not doing something in some sort of... You're not hiding in a bush. You're not behind a wall. You're not photographing behind a chair. You're not pretending you're not there. You're so clearly there. Do you think there's an element of that means people accept you more? And that seems counterintuitive because most people would think, no, I don't want a camera thrown in my face. But actually, it feels like people are very comfortable to be a part of your story.
Yeah, you have to do the groundwork.
Yeah.
Now that's not always possible with every single group. Like, if you turn up at, say, like something like a demonstration, you only have 5 or 10 minutes to talk to people about things. On other occasions, I'll spend a number of meetings, hours, talking to people, showing them the work that I do. For example, like before I started the Morris project, I went to a number of their sort of dance outs, and also I sat down with the people and showed them my website and showed them prints, not of Morris at all, just of my work, so they could see this is what I do. You can see I'm a kind of serious photographer. I'm not just here for today and gone tomorrow. And they accepted me and let me go to, in fact, they used to say to me, we've got this on or we've got that on. Would you like to come along? You've got, things that were quite different, like to do with practices, or we're just going for Christmas dinner. Do you want to come along? And in the end, they often used to say me, and so when are you going to join us then? And I said, I don't think I'm a dancer, really. I'm a photographer. I'll take the pictures, you do the dancing. Also, I'm not a great drinker. So, with Morris, you have to really be able to sink a few as you going around.
Do you? Right. Okay, I didn't realise.
In fact, any sort of whole day is more about drinking than dancing for a lot of these people. They dance occasionally.
Well, I don't know how they get the dances together then. I don't end up thwacking each other with those sticks.
It's interesting. I think for them, it's intuitive, and then suddenly they go wrong and find themselves in the wrong position. But they quickly catch up and find out where to go and fall back into the right position.
For anybody listening in another country, Morris dancing is well. We have talked about Morris dancing before. I have a strange aversion to it, David. I think many country shows with my parents standing only but a few feet tall, looking up at these people, thinking, "What on earth is going here?" Has left me with a sort of a slight anxiety about Morris dancers in my life. I'll come back to tribes shortly, though. I want to fill in some gaps, because there's a huge, long gap between the tribes story, which we'll come to, and what happened with your career. You left college, and what happened?
Well, I started out, unlike a number of my sort of peers who went off and became assistants to well-known photographers, and then eventually got some of their clients and started out as fashion photography or still life, advertising. I sort of didn't really want to do other people's work. It might have been a foolish idea. I should have really gone into the press somehow, but I went to work in a hospital, in a medical school in London. So I found myself in the operating theatre or in the experimental lab opposite, where they used to experiment on rats and mice and do all that stuff in those days. And my job was to photograph pretty much anything that needed photographing in the hospital or the medical school. So I did that for a few years, and then got the opportunity to take over running a newsagent shop. And so I left doing that and ran a newsagent shop so that I could then earn the money to go off and do my photography. And I'd be teaching part-time. Every so often I'd go off, to some corner of the world somewhere and do landscapes or documentary or whatever it was. And that was in the 80s.
Was that?
And that progressed, and I found myself towards the end of the 80s going into teaching and just carrying on with working alongside it, subsidising my own projects. So I didn't get published. I didn't do anything with them whatsoever. I went out, shot them, brought them home, processed the film, and then it went into a box under the bed. So if you go back to some of the early stuff, it hasn't seen the light of day for about 30 or 40 years. Wow. There's the abattoir, and there's the crematorium, then there's Brick Lane. All of that stuff was just sitting in boxes, and I knew nothing about it until about sort of 4 or 5 years ago. I built another darkroom, started looking at the negs and thought, wow, I didn't know I shot that picture. And so I'm looking at these pictures of these miners from my steg in 1977. I remember going there for a week thinking, oh, these are gold dust. They're so beautiful pictures, but they weren't the usual stuff. Like if you look at Eugene Smith or Roger Tyler, who spent his life living there photographing miners, they weren't that sort of picture. Because when I went to my steg and I arrived there, I was originally going to take pictures of miners, and then I thought there's something about these people and their faces, and I ended up seeing something in their faces that sort of really struck a chord with me. So I took more portraits than anything else, and the portraits, I think, speak of the kind of harsh environment, hard work, but a proud sort of group, a proud community, and so there's very few of them, but I think they do tell you something about what I felt about them and hopefully what they felt about being photographed.
There was a dark undertone to some of this. Oh, you mentioned the abattoir. There's one. I mean, how did you choose which subjects to photograph? What piqued your curiosity that you thought, right, crematorium, abattoir? These sound like stories for me.
To some extent, it was people interested me. And why do people do certain jobs? Yeah. I had an abattoir not far away from me, and I could just drive to it and park there. So I went along and talked to the people and said, how about it? Can I come down here for a couple of days and spend some time? And they said, yeah, fine. They weren't even bothered about looking at the pictures. They didn't want them. They just said, you can just come and go when you like. So I went there, and it's funny because I've got like 3 or 4 friends who are all sort of well-known photographers from that period, and they've also all got their sets that they shot in abattoirs. Must have been something in the 70s that we all went and did it. I think mine are a little bit different because I wasn't sure. I was battling with the idea of, what was vegetarianism and what were all these people on about? And so there I was in this sort of grimy abattoir, nothing like the sort of nice clean walls of modern abattoirs, grimy abattoir. And there were these people there that used to come down by train from the East End and work there. And I just photographed the kind of gore and the blood and these people in amongst this kind of mess. And my friend Barry Lewis said to me, why didn't you get their faces? There's very few of their faces in. I said, wasn't that important? What was important was just the scene, this big scene that I was immersed in.
It was interesting that you said in the text at the end of the piece, don't judge me.
Yeah, well, I think people do. I think people have a tendency to think that you might be either critical or trying to do something to reveal something that's not right, not legal, or you might be one side of the fence and they're on the other. Yeah. I was none of that, really. I was there as a young lad grappling with what was in my mind about what was okay and what was not okay according to what people were beginning to say, because it was, if you can imagine, this was long before, you could walk around Morrison's or Tesco's and find all these healthy foods that are kind of plant-based and all the rest of it.
Yeah, a long time,
So it was the people. And then I went to the local crematorium, found myself beginning what has later become what I called the English Way of Death. And I read a book by Jessica Mitford called The American Way of Death. And it intrigued me because she'd revealed, she'd got in there and discovered all this kind of malpractice going on in the funereal business in America. And I thought, well, I wonder what goes on in this country. I wonder if they really bring the bodies in and sort of turn them out of the coffin and just throw them into the fire, and then the coffins go back to be reused and all of that. So I went there and none of that, I didn't see any of that. I saw a really interesting process, but I also met some really interesting people. And, when I talked to them and said, what do you think of your work? And they said, well, it's a job. Someone has to do it. We're doing it. But, we have other interests. So then we talked about cars and gardening and all the other things. And these chaps live ordinary lives and were extraordinary people doing what you would call kind of an extraordinary job.
The craft of the analog process is how you describe your desire to stay working with 35mm film photography. The digital way has appealed, I'm sure, at stages. But you've stayed faithful to film. It's more than just a romantic notion, isn't it, though?
Yeah, I think probably because I know what I'm doing. Probably I'm not that brilliant using Photoshop or any of those kinds of things yet. I've still got a lot of learning to do. But I do find myself having to scan negatives and then mess about on computers, which is not quite as interesting, fun, romantic as being in a dark room. Wow. Translating what Ansel Adams has said, the negative, which is like the score, into the print, which is like the performance. There's something in that, and all the chemicals, and it's a different world, and it's a world that I started out and grew up in, and I've stuck to because I understand what I'm doing.
I enjoy looking through your portfolio work, and one of the things I particularly enjoy is I can't always date the photograph. And I like that. There's a timeless nature to using film, of course. I know that's almost a cliche that people say, but I think that's true. But it's also in the way that you make a photograph. Is it a conscious decision when you make your pictures to have the audience wonder? Well, I wonder whether this is some of his work from 1976 or whether it's 2023. I'm not quite sure.
I think that is an enjoyable thing for people to have about photography, is to wonder about when it was made. Because the thing about photographs, they pose so many questions.
Yeah.
They are simply marks on paper. Therefore, the idea of getting people to question has always been something, right back to what I was talking about, the punk period. But there's a timelessness about black and white photographs. Or rather, it's not necessarily, it's not timeless. It's actually, people just link it to that period that came before. And there is also something about the way in which you put together a picture, the way in which you kind of frame it. And I come from a generation and a period which had an approach to photographs that was, I like to use the word elegant. There's an elegance about a photograph by Ansel Adams or by Cartier-Bresson, it's something to do with the fact that it's a window and therefore things are cut off and they come in and out of the frame. But also it's something to do with the kind of early pictorialists who understood, what should be in the frame and how much of it. And I often look at modern photographs and think, well, I don't really like that. What is it I don't like about it? Is it the subject? No, it's not the subject. Is it the lighting? No, it's not the lighting. Well, it might be the lighting, it's not quite there. Or is it the focusing? I'm not quite sure about the depth of field. What is it? And then I realised it's because it doesn't quite conform to my internal idea of what makes a good photograph. And the good photographs, I think, have got something which is it's so difficult to put your finger on, but it is to do with this kind of selection of all of those things and structure.
And my thanks to David Wright, who is back for part 2 soon. It not 2 as in too soon, as in TOO, the numeric. We know, Neil, we know. It occurs to me I've not made many sketchbooks today. I've been making photographs, but it's a bit of a blur day today. It's like a featureless sky, which is sometimes not that inspiring, but there is, by this lock here, I've just walked past on the canal, there's a nice reflection actually of the walls that lead out from the side where the water's lower. Let's try this. 1/2/5 ISO 1000. Really? Oh, that's because I've got the neutral density filter on. Let's turn that off. 2/80th, that's better. ISO 160. That's quite a nice reflection. Reasonably decent greens from it's been raining, so the grass is certainly lush. Could I use more benign descriptions there? Right, I know what you're going to say next. Didn't you have somebody Larson on the show last week? Well, yes, we did, but that was Susan Larson, who I don't think is a relative to Philip Larson. And I believe in Swedenland, which is where this letter comes from, there's more than 1 or 2 Larsons. Hi, Neil. First of all, thanks for the wonderful work with the podcast. Thoroughly enjoying both the Photowalk and the Extra Mile edition. Thank you, Philip, for being one of our extra milers. And stand by, not for the pinstriped express going past, but stand by. Here comes my attempt at Swedish place names. Now, out the traps, I've decided to assume a more sing-songy approach to Scandic and Nordic words. That was the advice I was recently given. Neil, use a little more up inflection. Sing your way into the word or the place name, and you'll sound like you've been eating meatballs and lingonberries all your life. Lingonberries. Oh, now you're talking. The only berry you can legally eat with gravy. Well, apart from cranberry, of course, at Christmas time. And I know you're going to have a long, long list, my other listener. I'm writing to you from Hälsingland in Swedenland. I thought I'd send a few pictures from my latest photo walk, where I actually listened to the podcast whilst out photographing. What? You mean you don't listen in the office? Like my other listener, who clearly hasn't got to grips with what this is all about yet. Other times, I'm one of those who listen to the podcast on my way to work or when tending to the garden. See, I've just done exactly what I used to do at school. Read the whole text before commenting, Neil. I got back into photography last year after not using a camera for far too long. But suddenly I got the itch and found a point and shoot second hand. I do hope that came from mpb.com, he says briskly. That started a trip down the rabbit hole, so now I'm using both a Fujifilm and some Canon DSLRs. And I've enrolled in a distance course to help me get even more into this wonderful hobby. The course is really inspiring, with assignments related to a different photographer of the week, coupled with a year-long personal project. I'd like to know more about that course, actually. I've been thinking about doing a night course again myself. I did it years ago. It's well over 2 decades before I became in inverted commas, professional, whatever that means. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it really did. I love the study side as much as anything about the history. We were very lucky to have a teacher who was interested in art and photography. So I probably found myself looking looking at more stuff than I otherwise would have with maybe another tutor. So that has been playing on my mind to enrol myself in a course. For my project, I'm doing still lifes or lives of flower arrangements in season. Latest example included, but I digress. I'll put that latest example included on the show page. Like I said, I was on a photo walk the other week out in Stockholm's, I have a real problem with this word, archipelago. See, I went there with my partner and some friends of ours to spend a few nights camping. The weather was perfect, and so was our first trip to the I can't even edit this bit because there's a train going past. I can't get a decent edit. Archipelago. I'm going to have to use the another word for this. Coast. Archipelago. I'll get there. During the years, we've all heard much about it, but I've never been. We visited 2 islands in the southern part of the... would you stop doing this? Archipelago, where we were free to pitch our tents anywhere for 2 nights. Nataro and Alo. Or it should be Nataro and Alo. There we go. Good practice for the Swedish pronunciation. So day number 4 came and I needed some time alone. So I went off with yours truly in my ears and my 6D paired with my 35mm f2 to explore a bit. I found a small trail leading me from the beach where we were staying out to the cliffs and onto a bit more of a sketchy trail that took me around the coastline. I'm glad you didn't use the A word. The sun was out in all its glory, so I opted for some black and white nature pictures. It was good to walk with the blueberries, old gnarly pines full of character, and the stillness of nature. Really good for recharging. And it was good also to listen to the show, episode 388. Lots of inspiration, and it was fun actually to be out photographing while listening. I include some pictures, not from the actual walk, but from the beautiful surroundings where we camped. And it certainly is. All the best from Philip. Philip, your wonderful pictures will be on the show page. Those black and whites are exquisite, he says. Lingonberrying a while on the ek at the start of that word. Really, they are. Here we go. I'm going to have to add Stockholm to my growing list of how am I ever going to afford to do this. Right, my fellow photo walker, because of special editions last month, we didn't get a chance to link up with artist and podcaster Jeffery Saddoris, but this month, the stars, they've aligned, and it being the 4th Friday of the month, it's a chance to muse about creativity I think of Jeffery, and certainly when Jeffery was doing his podcast with Sean as well, as great thinkers when it comes to talking about art and photography. So here's 10 minutes with Jeffery, and this month I have a question that, it might not be on every photographer or creative's lips, but in the hushed corners of the Dog and Duck, I went past the other day, this is fantastic, the Pickled Pig pub, where photographers go to nurse whatever poison they're choosing for that evening. I reckon it's a question that they do discuss amongst themselves. Was the best work I did when I was naive and new to all this?
I've been doing a bit of work on the website of late, and it seemed to me, Jeffery, that the work I'm happy with the work I'm doing now when it comes to my wedding work. In my matrimonial world, I think my observational technique and my skills, if you want to call it that, I think they've grown and developed as you would expect they would. But I think my best work, or the pictures I seem most content with, are the ones that I shot a decade, maybe more ago. And I wonder if all artists, if I may call myself that for a moment, well, you're an artist in every form.
Okay.
Whether we feel that
your words, not mine, but go ahead.
Whether we feel that our best work is behind us, which seems very negative, but I think I don't know. Is it negative? I'm not sure it's negative. I just think it's an observation.
Well, I think it's an interesting question. And I think there are a couple different ways that we can look at it. And one is from the perspective of an audience, and one is from the perspective of the maker of the work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can look at, I can look at Annie Leibovitz, for example, and go, I really prefer her more energetic, less polished rock and roll photography, for example, to her Disney campaigns or the very lavishly lit and sets and costumes. Like, that's fine. It's impressive. But I still think that shot of Mick Jagger caught midair in 1975 is one of the best, if not the best, rock and roll photo ever taken.
So that's from an audience's point of view then. That's you seeing it because it's rock and roll.
That's right. That's right.
Whereas your really beautifully lit, perfectly staged pictures don't necessarily do the same thing for me.
Not as a viewer. Now, as a maker of that work, I would imagine maybe it's different. Because you're looking at the road that it took you to get there. You're looking at a level of refinement that maybe didn't exist in your early work, and you were chasing it. And now you've gotten to a point where you can do it fairly easily, and you can repeat it, so that becomes, that level of quality, if you will, becomes something you can commodify, that you can market, that you can repeat and make a living doing. Is it as satisfying? I don't know. I mean, in my own work, I look at some of the early stuff and I go, I didn't, I was still wrestling with technique. I'm still wrestling with technique, but I was wrestling even more. I think there is a feeling that earlier work can sometimes feel better because you haven't yet been saddled with the expectation of where you are now.
That's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I drew and painted all the time, and I never gave a thought to whether it was any good. Good wasn't something that existed. Was it fun? Did I enjoy it? And it wasn't like, well, did I learn a new technique, or is so-and-so going to like it, or is it going to be able to be monetized? Like, none of that stuff exists.
Yeah.
When you're just in it to do it.
That's the youthful naivety.
Yes. And as we get older and as our tastes improve, in quotes, then we look back and go, well, that wasn't very good. Well, but you're looking at good through these eyes now. You're not looking at them through the eyes of a 6-year-old or the eyes of a novice photographer who just picked up a camera and went, my God, this is revelatory. I can point this at anything and I can make a record of anything. There's no sense of, and I'm not going to say there's no sense, but good isn't the goal. It's just to use the tool and to, when I first started taking pictures, when my grandfather handed me a Yashica mat, he said, go take pictures. And I said, of what? Because that wasn't the way we used a camera. The camera was, you take it out, you photograph the thing, whatever the thing was, whether it's a birthday party or, grandma coming to visit or whatever it was. And then you'd put it back in the bag and there it would sit for the next weeks or months until the next event that needed to be documented. So when he said, go take pictures, and I said, of what? And he said, whatever interests you. I mean, that blew my mind. I didn't know whatever interests me. What do you mean? I can do that? So there was no pressure for it to be good. It just had to be interesting to me. And as I started photographing more, and I've talked about this before, the picture taking process was only a way to get me into the darkroom to the picture printing process, because that's where I really found the real interest and the real sort of craft, if you will, at that time. Yeah. Right? It wasn't at the camera level, it was at the darkroom level. That's where I got to play even more so. But I still wasn't really concerned with good, because I was still at the front end of that learning curve. I like that. That's a bumper sticker in itself. Good isn't the goal, and it should be, or it could be. I'm trying to use choice words and not. I learned that from you, and I've tried to implement it into my own life. So thank you again for that. I'm clearly not achieving it myself, but that's certainly something that I feel that I've learned through doing photography. Well, I've referred to many of my pictures that I make when I'm out on my walks as sketchbook images, which I suppose is permission to play. You don't think, right, okay. And what's wrong with that? Well, that's good. I think that's good. You're not thinking, this has got to be on Instagram. I want to get at least 1,000 likes on this particular one. I've never had 1,000 likes on anything in my life. Nowhere near it, but it remains in my dreams. But good isn't the goal. I think that's such an important phrase to take into not just your photography, but your life. I know And my wife knows if I come up out of the basement and I'm covered in paint, which happens fairly regularly when I'm in the studio working, at least, she knows that it's been a good day. It doesn't matter what I've made, started, finished. Doesn't matter. The fact that I was brush in hand, palette knife in hand, finger paints in hand, doesn't matter. If my hands are in motion, that's a good day.
Yeah.
Right? One of the hard things, there are two things actually. One is you are not your audience, right? And the idea of making anything should begin and end with you.
Yeah.
It shouldn't begin and end with, will it sell? Will it be popular? Will it get followed? Will it get like that? In a perfect world, those things shouldn't be at the top of the list. The do I like it? Did I learn something? Did I grow? Was there transformation? Was there connection to the materials? Whatever those things are that can inform the next work. I think that's more important because likes, follows, even money is not going to inform where the work goes next. Not positively anyway.
Can you imagine one of the grandmasters going back a couple of 100 years? If you picked him up or her and brought them forward to this day and age, sat them down in a chair with a glass of wine, obviously being all Parisian about this, and said, your art is going to live on, look, this thing here, this little thing here is called a smartphone. And dear Mr. Constable, or whoever you want to use here, you will need to gain at least 10,000 followers to enable you to have links back to your website. Already you've lost him.
Yeah, gone.
And
gone.
When you've done that, you're going to be looking for at least 1,000 likes, maybe, possibly more. Make sure you comment on them, Mr. Constable, because otherwise you'll be dropped by the algorithm.
Yeah. I think we get fooled, or we can get fooled into thinking what of our work is good in an age of social media. You know, we often conflate popular with good and good with popular, and back and forth, and that's not necessarily the case. Some of my favorite work that I've seen recently, people have a couple hundred followers, not a couple thousand or tens of thousands or millions.
Yes.
But it's phenomenal work, and I save it, and I have this sort of folder of saved work where I'm just blown away regularly by people who don't have massive followings. And my hope is that they don't care about massive followings, that they just keep doing that kind of interesting, compelling work that got me to stop and hit the save button and sit and think with that, or sit with it and think about it and look at it, rather than just tap, flip, tap, flip, tap, flip.
My thanks to Jefferey Saddoris. Good isn't the goal. Oh, it's the doing, isn't it? And that could have been today's title for the podcast, actually. I did consider it. I can't tell you how much I've wrestled with titles this week. Anyway, Jefferey is back on the extra mile, actually. Having what we call a noodle. We had a conversation after we'd finished recording our piece, and I revealed something I'd done for the first time in my life, surprisingly. That's you tease, Neil, you tease. I know, that's on the Extra Mile this week. Episode, is it 56? It's Extra Mile, EM 56, Extra Mile 56 this week. Oh, we're motoring through those. We did 100 mores, and they're still there to be listened to. What was it, quite 100? Just shy of. So there's quite a back catalogue of material to listen to on the Patreon channel. What have you seen, pups? This is not the nicest part of a regular walk I take here. We're right next to the busy A4 road. It's not the nicest part of the walk. I like the peace and quiet, and I like the birds to be singing in the trees. But we're just about to pass into a bit of forestry in a second. Maybe I'll get an opportunity for some more sketchbook images. I'm relying upon your sketchbooks this week. I really am. This sky, it really is doing absolutely nothing for me. Some decent reflections at the side of the riverbank here, but I can't return home with just reflections, can I? Next week we're talking about collections, collections, with Valerie Jardin. It's the week after that. Oh, blimey, this is notice when we have our street conversation maybe I've got a collection. And Valerie was extolling the beauty of making sure you build collections with the pictures that you make. Maybe I could certainly have a collection of reflections today. Come on, pups, let's get into the forestry. One of the real joys I get is populating the show page each week with the pictures, the wonderful pictures that you send in that accompany our stories and your letters. It is there, the show page. This is as an accompaniment, sometimes an amuse-bouche for those who see the page first and listen to the show second. Though now and then I receive hard copies of pictures and things that otherwise don't make their way to the digital platform. And I want to thank Michael of Mixonville for the wonderful zine that arrived on my desk a couple of weeks ago now. My apologies for my tardy reply. There's been a bit on, but it's no excuse, Michael. I do appreciate that. But what a lovely letter as well with it, which was a letter within the zine, which I will read back in my usual pardon me whilst I read praise from behind a sofa way. Though there's a pretty good reason for my very English uncomfortable shuffling coming up. So this letter, or these words, came with this wonderful printed zine that features 20 pictures, one of which, well, maybe two, I think it's one, has featured on the show over the last year. And it's a reminder to me that pictures need printing, because I did honestly sit with a coffee and pore over this zine and the pictures that you sent me. And it was a real glimpse, it really was, into what making pictures and walking with a camera means and has meant to you over the last year. And you know, our kids are 13 and 15 now, but they still grab the blurb books that we make each year. Having said that, we're 2 years overdue. We got to COVID, like so many things. It sort of slowed the process, so we must get back into that, really. Did you just mention the C word, the word that shall not be mentioned ever on your programme, Neil? I did. It slipped out. I apologise. I shall have serious words with myself in the boardroom when I get back. But the boys do still look at the blurbs that we've made since the day they were born. And there is usually some sort of hilarity. Did I look like that? Oh, look at Dad. There's a bit of hair on his head in that one. Anyway, hi, says Michael. Just a token of thanks for expanding my photographic world over the past year. And I suppose by extension, my actual world. Since an eye guided by... I love this, by the way. Since an eye guided by a camera sees a richer, more nuanced world than it likely would otherwise. Do you know, I'm going to read the final words of your letter as today's PS, because the letter actually goes on, because I think they're very apt in terms of the overarching message of this podcast, since you mention it. That being, take time out for you. And if a camera happens to be with you during that time, then often you and I and us and my other listener, if you send the pictures you make in, well, I think we're all the richer for the experience we have of seeing the paths that you walk on the show pages. So thank you, Michael. And as for your thoughts about an eye guided by a camera seeing a richer, more nuanced world than it otherwise would, well, I'm currently writing my standby first book with thoughts on the show, a kind of what I've learned. And frankly, it keeps changing shape, mentally and literally. But if there's one thing I do think, with your permission, I would like to lift those words for the book I'm making. It's this idea that you really have captured in those words, and your pictures. This idea of the camera being this passport. I've said this before, and I really believe it. This incredible passport to curiosity. The thing that makes us look. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of camera it is, smartphones included here, but this idea of this thing that makes us look and see and experience differently from the moment we're engaged in lifting that picture-making device to our eyes. So thank you, Michael, yes, for the zine, and for your contributions to the show over the last year. I really do appreciate your writing style as well. And I will read your other thoughts as a perfect PS at the end of today's show. If you would like to write in and send us the adventures that you've been making, the photographs, the stories. As I say, they don't have to include pictures. Then send your mails to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. Pictures, if you can resize them to 2,500 pixels wide, you will be my absolute hero. But don't worry if you can't. I will do the heavy lifting for you. And also, if you send them in, try not to watermark them, only because we have a certain design style on the page. But I will make sure, because it's right and proper that I do so, that I link to your website or your Flickr or your X. Yes, I'm remembering your X, your Insta, and so on, so that we can go and enjoy more of your work. Right. Let's hear part two of our conversation with David Wright. And in this part, we talk about that idea of the modern tribe, a belonging, if you will, and the idea of how being part of a group, a tribe in this case, how that can be beneficial for our health even. Obviously not withstanding the type of group or tribe you join, being a force for good and not otherwise. But we also talk about F8, which is a group of photographers specializing in documentary photography in and of Britain, which of course for our international audience may sound like it's not so inclusive, but the story of Britain through the eyes of documentary photographers, I know a lot of people, wherever they are in the world, find absolutely fascinating. The if you will, how we used to liveness. Is that a phrase? The how we used to liveness of times which are often viewed through rose-tinted spectacles. When I were a lad, petrol wasn't even a thing. We had to power our cars using tiny pit ponies, kept under bonnet, running round a tiny wheel, that sort of thing. Anyway, before I digress far too far, let's play part two of my conversation with an absolute gent of the medium of documentary photography, David Wright.
There aren't many genres, it seems, that you haven't worked in, even photographing funerals in Ireland. There aren't many cultures, actually, in places where you can photograph funerals without drawing a raised eyebrow. Ireland's quite a good place to start, actually. And you're quite drawn into Ireland for many, many reasons, aren't you?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet my wife, who comes from an Irish family. So we obviously went to Ireland quite a lot, and that's what sort of started the idea of photographing rural life on the west coast of Ireland. And one of the big things that occurs is a funeral. Catholicism was strong in Ireland. People lived, by the church. The Angelus rung twice a day, and religion permeated their life in many ways. And a funeral would be something where the whole village would turn out.
Yeah. And
in those days, they would pull the curtains and they'd stand there as the cortege went past. People walked normally because the graveyard was not far out of the village. So it was obviously part and parcel of that whole project. So this is what life was like in those days. And life and death was what it was. They worked on the land to get a living and get their food, and then the music celebrated that, and then at the end of it came death, and the church formed an integral part of that. And the church and the state were very closely linked up until very recently, the last couple of decades. Church and state were two things. And in fact, there's one picture there which I call Church and State. It's actually like a member of parliament and a priest standing right next to her, and there's other officials behind while she's addressing a public meeting.
It's a very personal view of religion that you had in those particular pictures. And actually, during COVID, while we talk about funerals, you photographed your father's funeral. I couldn't bring myself to take to the pulpit and deliver the words that I wrote about my dear father at his funeral. I can't imagine how you would even be able to approach photographing such a personal event. How did you go about it?
It was tough. I did it at the time because I sort of was finding it hard to come to terms with the reality of it. And photographs for me, a camera helps me come to terms with reality, because if I photograph it, I know that there it is and it's happened. And so I did photograph it, and it was probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. And it's a very moving set of pictures for us as a family, because it begins before the day in two ways. It begins with going along to photograph the grave diggers and see the grave, the hole, and then going with my mum for her to say her farewells to my dad. And then we come to the day. That was really quite difficult, because I remember we got in the car and we followed the funeral car, the hearse, for like about 30 minutes. It drove from the funeral home to the cemetery. And I was there, I'd got my mum in the car and my wife and my aunt. And we sort of just sat in silence, driving along, looking at the hearse and my dad on his final journey.
The modern tribes of England, I think we should, it's a good opportunity to talk about that. It's a running series of projects highlighting life and beliefs, pastimes, religion, eccentricity, history. The adjectives would flow. If this is long tail, it will probably never have an end, would it? Is there an end?
It is a really important series. In fact, I think you've just produced a really good description of what it is. It sort of covers life. It covers a whole range of different kind of things that we have and hold in our lives. It's like my version of Steichen's Family of Man. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that, but it's to try and look at groups in society, and it had to be, when it started out, it had to be groups that you could freely join yourself, which is why when I went to talk to the pearly kings and queens of London, I realised that wasn't going to be part of it, because you can't freely join their group. You have to be, a family.
What was the catalyst, though, for making this work?
I'd read a number of books about groups and how important it was to be a member of a group, and how interconnectedness can really benefit you as a person. And some studies done in Australia had even come to the conclusion that you can extend your life by this number of months if you're a member of a group. And so if you're a member of two groups, it might extend it by even more. It seemed kind of improbable, but it also seemed very interesting, and possibly a way that people could find their life more fulfilling. And also, the more you get out on your feet and do things, the more thinking you have to do, the more it keeps you alive and your brain alive, the less chance I suspect there is of falling into the dementia trap. Now, this sounds like cod science, so I'm not going to try and be the scientist or the doctor and sort of say anything other than I think join the group, it will do you good.
Well, there were two groups I picked out in particular. One was the railway enthusiasts. That's a particular tribe, a tribe that I've enjoyed photographing, and probably because of my father and his absolute adoration of everything to do with railways. God knows why he didn't become a work on the railways. I think he would have loved it. But there was that tribe, and the other one was the pagan one. Paganism is not necessarily what the movies will have you believe it is. So actually a growing belief structure of a very different kind, particularly in the UK, where support for the church seems to be dwindling. I've, as in my wedding work, I've shot 2 pagan rituals already this year, with a further to come. It was a modern group to select, I think, David.
Yeah, it's interesting you call it a modern group, because obviously it's pagan, been around for centuries.
Yeah.
But when I went onto one of their websites, they said it's the fastest growing religion in the UK, and that intrigued me. So it started out as a portrait project, but I've also done, I got invited to a hand fasting down a Glastonbury tour of all places. I mean, there's 2 places, I think, that you would want to photograph a hand fasting. One is Glastonbury, a tour, and the other is Stonehenge. Because they're so evocative. Anyway, I photographed this hand fasting. It was very interesting. A few of the pictures are on the website. The rest I have still to sort of get them on there. But they are a very interesting but closed group in many cases, which is why it's one of those things which is a good example of what I was saying earlier about really have to get to know the people. They have to get to know you. They've got to trust you. They've got to feel confident you're going to do a good job, and also confident that whatever you produce, you're going to sort of show them and talk about it first before you go off and do something else with it. And, then they start to let you in.
Talking of trust, you mentioned the T word. Homeless and Locked Down showed a real empathy to the subject within the piece. How did you find Paul?
I was walking my dog through the wood and I spotted the tent deep in the forest, and went past it for about a week thinking, I wonder what that is. I wonder if there's anyone there. And I couldn't get the courage up to go and speak to him because I really had no idea what this person would be like. And I've seen homeless people in the past in the cities, and always wondered whether I've got the guts to go and actually see them and speak to them. But in the end, I saw him walking along through the park, and that's when I stopped him and got chatting to him and asked him about himself. And then he said, I'd like to sort of do this project with you. And he said, oh yeah, that'd be fine.
I don't know, because of your move, whether you can give us an update on the end to that story, because it doesn't end particularly kindly, does it? It ends up with his tent being kicked down. Yeah,
I've just been putting together the negatives again to sort of rework them and make better versions of them for a number of purposes. And it's going to have more pictures in it, but the end is still the end. The last two pictures are perhaps the most important, probably for a lot of people the most boring. There's a picture of what basically looks like a rubbish dump. Yeah. You can't really tell what it is. It's a wide-angle vertical shot of some smashed up stuff and some junk lying around and some old rags. But when you look at it more closely, there's his tent. It's been pulled down. There's what was his guitar broken up into pieces. So that's one picture. And the other picture, perhaps the most poignant, if you go right back to the beginning, he's quite religious, and he showed me his Bible and he showed me his Pilgrim's Progress, which I thought was very poignant. So then we get to the end, and there is this book. I spotted it further away. It had been flung right over into some bushes, and I went over to it, and this is the honest truth, I didn't touch it. It was there open at Jude, and Jude is a kind of a wanderer stroke kind of disciple of Jesus. And I thought, how interesting that this man's life can be summed up through this, through these two pictures. I know nothing more about him after that. I didn't hear any more about him. I don't know whether he's still alive or whether he's thriving or whether he's managed to get back to where he used to live in Grays, Thurrock. All I do know is that I remember one point in those 3 months, he rang me up from hospital. He said, sorry, I haven't been in touch. I've been in hospital. He said he'd cracked up, and he did come out, and I did carry on photographing and speaking to him. But, these people, they lurch from one thing to another. They are vulnerable. And I'm currently doing some work with a charity in Leeds. It's the Crypt, and it's called Growing Rooms. And what I'm doing is they're telling me their story, and then I take a portrait of them. Yeah. And so the idea is it's going to end up as a book of about 20 odd stories. And this is probably the first time they've ever had to sit down and tell me their whole story from when it first started, often when they were like 4 or 5 years old, living in a household where their dad's making drugs on the stove. And they go right the way through how their life has gone wrong, and then eventually they've reached rock bottom, and then they've been picked up and given this opportunity with Growing Rooms, which sets them on a journey of like about 14, 15 months where they live in, and they do the 12-step program. Then they're given an opportunity at the end of that to often, get a new life. Like they help them get a bank account, they help them get a CRB, so that if they want to work in the charity, they can. For many of them, it picks their life up and points them in the right direction. And it's a much better way than going into some rehab for a week or two.
It's an incredible project, that, and I'll be sure to leave a link. F8. Now, we talked of COVID and Paul's story there, and that was during COVID. F8's a project that grew out of that period. It's very hard to sometimes find positive stories out of COVID, but there are some, and this is one. that particular project. It's about picture making, it's about documenting, but importantly, it's about photographers, because photographers get a chance to have what's called a takeover within it. It's a project it's a love letter to photography in many respects, isn't it? On Instagram and in print. We'll come to the print in a moment, but let's start with the Instagram and those that take over. There's some pretty big names in there.
Well, that's a wonderful way of describing it. A love letter to photographers or photography. I met this guy on Instagram. We sort of hit it off during COVID because we both liked each other's work, which always helps. But we also had a view of what documentary photography should be, as I sort of tried to describe it, that sort of classical approach. And we didn't see enough of it anywhere in the world. There was not enough of it. And certainly not on Instagram. I said to him, we should set up what's called a collective. He said, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Who's going to be in it? So we gathered a couple of names up of people who we like their work, mainly new photographers, young people, and said, OK, well, that'll do. And in July of 2020, I think it was, off we went with the F8 Collective. Well, it took a month or two, and I said, let's change it to F8 Documentary, because I think it says more about what we do. And my job, I suppose, was to curate it. And so I had to sort of not only have the people who are members, but also look around for guests. I said, well, we've got 6 members and we can get 2 guests. That's an 8-week set of takeovers. That seems about right. And so we embarked on this, and it started to be successful. We aren't what you would call, we don't have hundreds of thousands of followers. We're not viral. But what I think we are is something that's sort of a very respectable platform or site to look at documentary photography, old and new. Yeah. So there's a couple of criteria. The photographers have to be alive. I know we deviated one Christmas because Tish Murtha's sister agreed to let us have some of her pictures. Yeah. But other than that, every photographer has to still be alive so they can do the takeover. And it has to be British documentary photographs. And gradually, people have picked up on it, and some people have said they'd like to join. So we've now got 12 members. And there's a few names. John Claridge, who is a very well-known photographer, and you've probably seen him in Pirelli calendars and on record covers. He's got 70 books. He's got more books coming out at the moment about London during the 60s. And Barry Lewis, who's major force in the world. But if you go down to Trafalgar Square, you'll often see him there with this rather large sort of 5.4 camera on a tripod, and he stands on a box and he takes these portraits of just people. It's
a zine as well. I would imagine, knowing your love of analog, seeing it in print is it any more satisfying than seeing it digitally in Instagram? Is there a different kind of satisfaction?
Oh, I prefer to look at the books any day. I like to look at the book. For example, my pictures I took in India that I've just started scanning and putting on my website.
Yeah, the colour ones in Nepal and India. Yeah,
the colour ones. Yeah, the ones that there's some stuff there from Varanasi of funerals and early in the morning down at the River Ghats, and all of that. I don't know. I haven't yet tried getting them printed into a magazine or anything, but they certainly look really good on Instagram. They don't look quite as good as they do on the transparency.
Well, that's transparencies for you, though, isn't it? Yeah. Looking at those for a view.
But print for me is the thing, and that's why after we got F8 going, about 4 or 5 months later, I thought, right, what I'd really like is to do the next step now, and that is to get the F8 documentary magazine going. Yeah. And I was in conversation with a publisher, and he was very up for it. And so we started out with a very kind of hand put together version. It didn't have much in the way of text in it, but it was the prototype for what F8 was to become as a magazine. And it the idea was that the 8 takeovers on Instagram became the 8 sets in the magazine, right. And the photographers produced the text on Instagram so that the text was just transported into the magazine. So what you have is this magazine. The first one didn't have it, but onwards from that, you have a magazine which is the photographers' pictures with their own words. Yeah. describing either the project or what they were trying to do, or, it's very interesting to read the text alongside, the narratives. We call them long narratives. Some of the sets are connected long narratives, others are discrete pictures with their own. And that has gone from strength to strength. I'm just about working on number 15 at the moment. And in the main, it sells out completely.
Well, one of our good friends, Kieran Doherty, is a storyteller within F8.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned Kieran. Kieran is one of my favourite photographers. He's got a series coming up in the magazine soon, which is a really moving series about the bodies of the troops brought back from Afghanistan. His series that he did of 3 years photographing his parents during lockdown.
Yes.
That brings me on to something slightly different, which is I'm working on a book called Lockdown, and it's 12 photographers. I think it's 14 stories at the moment, photo stories, and it's documentary about COVID. It's not sort of an emotional response, it's a documentary response. There's lots of emotional responses where people are staring out of windows or sitting on beds or something. This is concrete stuff. It's actually about what happened, and Kieran Doherty's very kindly contributed a dozen pictures and the story about looking after his parents that's going to be in it.
It was a very, very. We talked. We went actually for a photo walk and talked about that story. One of my greatest privileges of having recorded interviews was being taken back to meet his mum and dad when Dad was still with us, and Mum was insistent on some good old-fashioned cake and tea at their place.
Oh yeah,
it was a real privilege. At the end of the lockdown story about Paul, you say for Paul, wherever you are. And I wonder, just closing now, where you are, David, where you are with your projects, with your photography. It sounds like some of them are going to go on, as you say, until the very last shutter that you press. Hoping that that's a long, long way away, of course. So where are you in your photographic adventure of life?
I think I'm just starting out. I don't think I'm anywhere near finishing yet. To stay alive, you've got to stay alive. You've got to do things, and I don't have time to sit around, and I spend a lot of my time thinking about photographs, and I think that's one of the things that perhaps has been really good, is it helps you through everything, and at the end of it, you're still thinking about what's the next picture or how you're going to do it. So perhaps when I'm lying there just about to pop my clogs, I'll be thinking, if I take this picture now of me with my last breath, who's going to do something with it? A selfie.
And my thanks to David Wright for his time on the show today. David Gilbert Wright for his time on the show today. I shall, of course, have links to his work on the show page today, and a couple of pictures as well to demonstrate some of the stories that we've to show some of the stories that we've discussed. And that's it for today. Though if you can't wait until next Friday and want a little more walking together, then the Extra Mile edition for today, number 56, is out, and it's a kind of walking roundup of the month. I'm trying something new. If it works, wonderful. If not, I'll put another roll of film in and change the ISO for next end of month. And there's a sort of a first that I discuss on the show, as I've hinted to already, as I enjoy a conversation, a bit of a noodle with Jeffery Saddoris. The Extra Mile is part of our Patreon channel, which our wonderful community of supporters kindly donate to. Photographers walkers who want to keep this podcast here week after week. They make a modest and generous monthly or annual contribution. I said last week, didn't I? The monthly price starts from it's the price of a skinny vanilla spiced latte. We're not even talking, as I said last week, frappuccino. I shall have to change the end of at the end of the show. I'll find some other things that cost about £3 a month. The first 5 minutes of the show is available for free, so click the link on the website for the Extra Mile. It's the orange button on the right hand side, just at the top. You can see it just there. That's the one. And a mention too for our monthly live In Vision Zoom show. It happens usually the first Tuesday of the month, but because I'm off to talk to a camera club actually in Brighton, looking forward to that. It's a talk about sound and pictures and emotion and that kind of thing. Because I'm doing that the first Tuesday of the month, we'll have the live Zoom show will be the second Tuesday of the month, and I know we've yet to announce the pop-ups for those that are our Antipodean, is that the right expression, listeners. I'm going to be doing that in the winter. I've decided that summer stretched into autumn, and your summer, my winter, we'll be doing some pop-ups. Our PS to the show is to come, but before that we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to. I'll think about what's been said today, and there's been much said, thanks to the letters and the guests today. And the play-out song today is from Claire Kelly, appropriately titled Together Flavoured Song, really. This is a song called Together Again.
We'll just head down, carry on, 'cause what else can we do but get through? And we'll sing hallelujah, but what is that to you right now? But let's talk in a way that can give us some faith to go around. We'll hold tight as we can when it's better again, and that'll sustain me for now. My friend, when we're together again, together again, when we're together again. When we're together again.
That's Claire Kelly and Together Again. Shall we do a final sketchbook picture? Go on. Don't be moody, Neil. Even if the sky is not necessarily living up to your expectations. Go on, across the field. What do we have? Shutter speed. Oh, what's happened here? That's not quite right. Right, okay, here we go. 6/40th, f4. That's quite nice, I suppose. It's a view. It's a view. It's a sketchbook. There we go. I think Barney's given up. You sat down. Is that it? Is that a protest? I'm not going any further. We have walked quite a long way today. Come on, this way. Come on. This is not the way we usually go. He's a bit of a creature of habit, is our Barkalot. He really is. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are about, or you are, an extra miler. My promise to you is to keep building this community of kindness, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do. Photographing, walking and sharing. Talking of which, on the show page, there are some very handy buttons, now that you mention it, to help share the show. But also be sure to press the follow or subscribe button on your podcast app. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell with Emily Renier, who look after our Facebook members. Right, the postscript for today is from Michael of Mixonville, from his zine, which I feel very lucky and honoured and privileged to have. I'm laughing, Michael, because really the dog, Barney Sir Barkalot, has just dug his heels in this path and is refusing to walk further. And now he's pulling me back in the other direction. Right, come on, let's do this postscript and we can go home, Barnes. The zine was called Wandering Impressions, and I think it's my call to action, really, both personally and outwardly, to suggest that we all, me included, think about the joy of printing something tangible, something that says, I was here in this moment, I did this, not something that just ends up as ones and zeros on Instagram. There are some closing words that I'd like to read from the letter at the head of the zine, some of which I read to you earlier, and I'm reading them because I think they are very pertinent to the message of this here podcast. And that notion that making our pictures doesn't have to be a grand gesture or a hope that we'll get 10,000 likes or whatever on a social media platform of your choice, that goads you to be more loved, that there's pleasure to actually seeing and holding something tangible. Here's a selection, wrote Michael, just before you look at the 20 pictures. Here's a selection, he said, at the head of this scene, of my favourite photographs from a recent trip to the east coast of America land. The majority of them veer away from my usual style or subject, inspired by the many guests you've had on the podcast. And while the artistic merits of that detour are certainly in the eye of the beholder, I found a revived joy in taking them, which in a way is all that really matters.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.